Yeah, my name is Heinzelmann. I'm the CEO of antegma. I'm working with AEM for more than 20 years now. Basically, my day-to-day business looks like that I'm running on building AEM architectures, building cloud-native solutions, and focusing heavily on integrated ecosystems. Today, more or less, everything what we do is around content supply chain. And as part of that, also we're looking into scenarios how we can integrate Adobe's latest technologies like edge delivery and Universal Editor into that whole content supply chain topic. And for that, we had to basically extend what we do today with AEM. And I want to give you a few insights how we do that. So I will give you a short introduction later regarding what Universal Editor is. Maybe some have already used it. Maybe some are already starting to using it when they migrating from an on-premise instance to now the cloud solutions from Adobe. I also want to give you a short demo of what we have built with a few integrations from really customer scenarios and some best practices which we learned. A little bit of background, what is Universal Editor? It's basically the latest evolution from Adobe's WYSIWYG, which we know today. It should support basically everything. Adobe says that like that. It basically helps us to deliver headful solutions and also headless solutions. The main focus, what is maybe different to what we have seen before, it's basically that we always have the author should always have the context, which is different what we had before when we always had a lot of modules, a lot of views, and the focus is really that the editor always sees what he's really doing at that moment. Universal Editor was basically introduced with AEM as a cloud service, especially for AEM-based edge delivery sites called Crosswalk. Somebody have already known that. But it also supports today, with the latest version, AEM 6.5 for headless applications. So if you want to build or use the latest technologies from Adobe also on your on-premise solutions, you can also do that today if you connect the Universal Editor to your on-premise instances. Also another hint, most think that Crosswalk or Universal Editor only works with AEM-based solutions. It also works with document-based authoring today, called the Alive or Dark Alley. So that's basically the latest evolution from everything that you known before with SharePoint is now moved to Dark Alley, which is Adobe's own storage solution. And this is also supported by Universal Editor today. Yeah, short, that's basically Universal Editor in a nutshell. I think in the past we tried to, let's say, manipulate Adobe's existing authoring system in maybe not the best ways. We had to overlay the code in the apps directories. We had to hack our code into the front ends using jQuery. I think everybody knows AEM with nested multifields. To bring some complexity or let's say complexer UIs into the dialogues. Basically, this was always actually like a really hacked solution, not a proper way to extend it. This has changed now. The difference is that Adobe basically give us a way to have a proper way to bring our extensions into the Adobe product platforms without really modifying the product itself. This has a big benefit. The big benefit is everything that we did before, using the legacy mode, I call it, using overlays and jQuery, always gave us the headache if we upgraded it. With a new version come, new service package, if you had an AEM version change from 6.4 to 6.5, we always had to make a lot of effort into doing regression testing. We have to check whether our extension still worked, and often it was the case that it doesn't work at all, because Adobe changed something internally, and as it's not really supported in that way, what we did before, it always gives us basically a lot of effort to having a proper working solution after the upgrade. This has changed now. Adobe has introduced Adobe App Builder. Adobe App Builder is their basically own, let's say, solution to host our extensions now. And they have really provided proper APIs. That means we can build microservices that allows us to extend Adobe in a safe fashion. And that means that we don't have the high costs for maintaining those applications. Another big benefit comes with this change. We're using now modern technologies. Before, we still used jQuery, which I think is today really not really used in modern web applications anymore by most of us developers. And the funny thing is, if you're using React and TypeScript, we can bring also in other developers which have no experience with AEM to develop integrations for our for our websites, which was not possible before. Yeah, so that is the big benefit. And yep, that means also that we can be basically, through the whole scenario, can roll out the applications much faster and be more, have a safe fashion to do that. I want to talk a little bit about the architecture. The host application, in this case, I will also talk a little bit later about other host applications which Adobe has. In this case, is Universal Editor. And Universal Editor has basically some extension points. Those extension points define what you can do with your extension. And in that way, what you would do is you start to create your own extension, implementing those extension points. And the extension itself is hosted on AEM and on App Builder, and basically only integrated into the Universal Editor using an iframe. So that's a big benefit, that we're having a separation that runs separately from AEM in a let's say container-based fashion, or a serverless application. And yeah, we have no scaling issues, and just everything handled. Another thing is, if you have written our application extension is now interchangeable here, we have to register it. So that means if you have implemented your extension, you have to give the Universal Editor a hint that you have something here that they should integrate into UI. For that, Adobe has written an extension registration. And if you when you load your application, you have basically call the extension registration to register your application or extension to give them a hint that they should load it. Yeah, that's the base architecture, how you basically integrate an extension into Universal Editor. Different view, but different topic. If you start to integrate third-party applications into your extension, for example, we will see later, I will show it, we're using a different DEM solution. You might be interact with that solution using tokens. Before, if you need a token, it's always complicated where to store it if you have an extension. Adobe gives you a little bit of help here. They have not only the possibility to host your UI in the extension, but you also can host your actions. Actions are basically microservices, or serverless application functions running inside of App Builder. And you can call them via a REST API, or even call them via a cron job or something like that. The actions are can be secured using tokens. That's the standard. In this case, you can use your standard Adobe token, for example, that you get from your Universal Editor, and call the actions itself, which then can again make a secure call against your REST APIs in the third-party solution. For example, a DAM solution. And that means you don't send any client credentials, secrets, passwords via HTTP between your extension and your application. So it's really a big security topic. Also offloads a little bit of the complexity from the UI into actions, helps you that they are really running smoothly in the UI, that you don't have to basically bring everything into the UI itself. Different direction. Yeah, App Builder in context maybe. What is App Builder? I've talked a lot about App Builder. App Builder is basically Adobe's solution, which you can use to run apps, different kind of apps, any app which you want to do. It's not tied to the Universal Editor. It's not tied to extensibility. It's basically also made that you can interact, for example, using webhooks, everything. In this case, we're using it here in this context only for hosting our applications and running our serverless backends. As technology, we can use Node.js for the runtime actions. Maybe you already heard that it's Adobe I/O called it. So Adobe I/O is basically the base for App Builder. And you can basically use TypeScript and JavaScript in this case, as we support Node.js. For front-end, basically, we simply rely on React. The reason for that is basically that the whole routing for the extension is also based on React Router. I think a lot of developers are already familiar with that, because basically I think it's the most used feature in a React application itself. If you create a new app in App Builder, it comes per default with a stage and a production workspace. You can also add additional workspaces if you need it, so that you can create your own CI/CD pipeline, which is also basically coming with GitHub Actions. So basically, you're getting everything from App Builder which you need to run your extensions, or basically run your extensions, develop your extensions. And that's the benefit of App Builder. Short hint, if you want to use that, you should talk to your Adobe reps, because it's not really included as part of the standard package, I would say. As a developer, we need also a tool beside of App Builder. So App Builder is basically the hosting solution. Now we need a tool to interact with the hosting solution. In this case, we're having a CLI. It's our Adobe I/O. And Adobe I/O is basically what you maybe know from AWS or Azure. It's a CLI which allows you to interact with everything which is related to Adobe. In this case, it's basically the tool chain for everything which you want to do with App Builder. It allows you to basically do local development, push your code to production, also gives you templates to scaffold your whole application so that you don't have to think about how to set it up. Simply you call Adobe App Init and you're getting a variety of templates which you can use for the setup of your application. Also, normally we try to, we want to debug our extensions. If you're having a normal React application, we would use something like npm run start. In this case, we would not use npm run start, we use IO app run. Basically a similar methodology. So simply set up a local solution which live reloads our code if we develop something, and speeds up the whole development a lot. It's also basically available as an npm package. And in this case, it means you can also use it for CI/CD. If you don't want to use Adobe GitHub Actions relies itself on Adobe I/O. But you can basically also install it as an npm package on your Jenkins, on your Azure DevOps, whatever you want to use here, and use that to promote your code from staging to production, build it, etc. Another hint, if you want to use actions, it's also the tool which allows you to basically getting a little bit of debug information or troubleshooting information if you run your code as a serverless action. So that's basically what you do with Adobe I/O. Yeah, short hint, what can we do with the extensibility in Universal Editor? We have basically, let's say, 5 options. Depending on what you want to do, you have to choose the right methodology. To be honest, it really makes sense to think about first what you want to do from a, let's say, user experience perspective before starting developing. Because each tool has, let's say, their specific, or each extensibility option has their specific purpose. If you want to basically have only short actions, call something, the header menu is basically your go-to solution. If you're having more complex stuff, which is, let's say, more like multi-view dialogue, you still have to go with a model dialogue. It's really, at the moment, the solution which we should only use in certain circumstances, because it's basically has one, because it basically blocks the view from the author. So that's a big topic. The go-to solution, which we always see, is custom property rails. Custom property rails are basically, if you want to add a lot of content into the editor without losing the context what you do. Because if you do that, you can directly reload the editor and change the view for the author. It directly sees what's changing. I think that the most underrated item on the list is the custom item renderers, because that gives you the option to extend the standard way to define blocks in Universal Editor, because you can write your own fields and define them, let's say, in a way that it gives you complex options to interact with properties. And then at least, and I think it's the biggest and from the most complex use case if you're using custom events. Yeah, short hint. If you want to start using it, the last hint, we also have to basically think about how you can interact with the Universal Editor itself. We have the option to communicate with the Universal Editor. It's not DOM hacking anymore, which we had done before. We have basically 2 domains which we can use. The shared context, which gives us access to tokens, org IDs, etc., if you want to interact with any Adobe solutions, other Adobe solutions. And we have also the editor state, which gives you the options to basically interact with the elements which are visible in the editor. That could be fields, could be component blocks, etc., what you have selected. Everything is available here. I jump over the other stuff so that we go into the demo. I think that's more interesting for you. I would start my Universal application. It's, let's say, a boilerplate, a little bit modified boilerplate, which we use here. And we have built here 2 or 3 integrations into that demo. The first thing what we want to do is we're having a different DAM solution integrated. At the moment, you see an image, and on the other side, you see only a text on all text. What we want to bring in is now the option to select another image. For that, we start our local version of the extension. In this case, I go into the Universal, into the Canto extension, type in IO app run, and start our application now. That means at the moment we're running a local application, and that's the way how you develop it. Easy. Then you can tell the Universal Editor to load it. Also easy to do. Simply enter the additional parameter, and you can live load your extension. No demo without failures. So then let's try another extension. So we have built a formula. We have built a form editor because our customer has not the volume to basically use AEM forms. And I think that's a lot of websites have the issue that they really have not too many form submissions that forms make sense. And in this case, we started to think about how we can build a form extension, form builder here. And what we come up is that we needed an option to basically easily extend our forms. And in this case, the issue was that we had the issue that the limitations on the AEM side doesn't allow us to add multi-fields. For example, if you want to add an option, you would need to have a field here which allows you to add more than one parameter. Key value pairs could also be something more complex. And normally you can have multiple fields or multi-fields too, but they only allow you to add one field. If you have a combination on, let's say, more complex data, then you would need something more feasible for that. And in this case, we come up with that extension basically here, which allows you to add custom fields and in an easy way. So if I save that one, now we're having a drop down, which is basically using now JSON data instead of simple string values to render the whole solution. So that's an easy way to extend your Universal Editor. And then the last part, which I want to show you, so that's basically the way how to build a custom item renderer in this case. We had the idea to basically give you the option to call workfront from here, make an approval process. And for that, initially we thought about doing that in the page properties to define what are the reviewers. But the problem is if you're doing that, we're losing the context again. So the idea is always be in context in the solution. So we basically use a custom panel here, which allows you to define the reviewers to interact with it, looking for different users. For example, adding them to your review process, adding here what's their permissions, and allows you to basically interact with workfront directly in this case, and pull in the information from workfront without leaving the context. You can then do that, and what you also can do in this case, as I said, we need now something to kick in our approval process. So we have now defined what our reviewers are. We also need to basically start the process. And in this case, we're using the header menu, which we already said is the easy way to start a new action. And in this case, we click on the action itself. Then we're having now the interruption of a modal dialog, which is basically which we only would to use in, let's say, limited scenarios. Seeing again what we have entered in the custom properties rails, because this is pulled out of the repository and can start a new approval process. And so easy we can start to integrate a whole different solution into Workfront, into Universal Editor, with a few clicks for the editor. Yeah, and I think it's a different way to extending the editor instead of having a lot of dialogues and having, let's say, only hacks to extend it, which gives you here the benefit beside of, yeah, easy way to develop it today. Maybe a few things about distribution. As the last part. Distribution is available via Adobe Exchange. Don't wonder. There are private applications and also public applications. So if you develop an application only for a customer, for your internal organization, you can, it's still published via Adobe Exchange, and it also has a proper review and approval process, especially if you have bigger organizations. And the same is also then for public applications. The only difference is if you have an internal application, it's reviewed by your system administrator. And if it's in public applications, it will be reviewed by Adobe. Same process, but easy to basically do that via Adobe Exchange and kick in off via Adobe Developer Console. A few best practices, what we learned doing those extensions. First of all, don't build complex extensions, really purpose-built. Keep it simple. Don't over-engineer. I think I would say that's the most important thing. Not everything has to be an extension. That's the first thing. The second thing is if you don't think about using blocking UIs. As you have seen, using dialogues really disrupts the whole authoring experience. And for that reason, look into buttons, look into customer property panels, look into custom property rails. That's the way to go. One of the most important security aspects is use serverless, use Adobe, use the actions in App Builder for your integration, because it's really helps you if you're talking to the user security guys to get your App Builder extension, the extension App Builder running. And another thing is, if you save something to the repository, validate it. Because everything which you enter into your extension and submit will directly written into JCR, and in this case, if you load it again, it's not really valid, it will crush your extension. Yeah. Another hint for you, the whole app builder is basically the main option how you can extend the whole Experience Cloud. It works for Universal Editor, it works for content fragments, AEM assets views, but also outside of AEM, Commerce, Admin, Workfront, AutoGen Studio. Yeah, it's the way to go to extend basically all your Adobe applications now. I think that's a wrap.
Thank you, Patrick. There's like one question who has like a lot of votes. It's also the question, if it wouldn't be written, I would have written it, because we faced like the same story at one of our customers. Like, yeah, Universal Editor, feature-wise, not as far as classic page editor. AEM core components do not work. So is it worth the effort migrating existing legacy project to Universal Editor? What's your opinion?
I think if you want to use edge delivery, it's the way to go. If you're having more complex websites, I would not look into document-based authoring, to be honest. It's the way to go to edge delivery without headaches, I would say. From a feature perspective, there are a lot of features hidden which you don't see if you don't look into the extension manager. Adobe has written already a lot of extensions which basically fill the gap. Multi-site manager, translations, etc., all available. You only have to activate them. They are not activated per default, which is also good because it doesn't overload the UI. If Adobe would activate everything which they have as an extension, it basically would mess up the whole UI because there are so many features now already there.
Excellent. Thanks for your advice. Thank you, Patrick.